Welcome to Curly Convos. I'm your host, Curly Sid. Curly Convos is where raw discussions meet radical ideas. I'm Sydney, a 23-year-old Gen Z activist on a mission to spark change. I work in nonprofit spaces for reproductive health, rights, and justice. I'm a proud union member, a local leader, and a passionate advocate for racial justice and equity. This podcast goes beyond the headlines and surface level conversations. We're here to ask big questions, challenge assumptions, and dig into the issues that truly matter. Each episode is a chance to think deeply, connect ideas, and see the world through a fresh lens. We'll dive into the conversations that are shaping our generation, from why voting should be the least radical thing you do, to how fashion reflects social movements. Join Curly Convos every other Friday for bold takes, fresh perspectives, and unfiltered discussions that push boundaries and inspire action. 2025 is going to be interesting. In the words of Hassan, things are already getting worse. I first want to begin this episode by talking about the alt-right's reaction to Donald Trump winning the election. A second Trump win, from what I saw, equals embracing bigotry. So I'm first going to start with this video from Nick Fuentes. I'm sure you've seen it. There have been 100 commentary videos about it, but we're going to watch it anyway.
The feel when you're totally not pressed. The feel when we control your bodies. Hey, bitch, we control your bodies. Guess what? Guys win again, okay? Men win again. And yes, we control your bodies. Hi, I'm your Republican congressman. Hi, I'm your Republican congressman. It's your body, my choice. And men, women again. Men win again. There will never, ever be a female president. Never. There will never be a female president, ever. It's over. Glass ceiling? Dude, it's a ceiling made of fucking bricks. You will never break it. Your stupid face keeps hitting the brick ceiling. We will keep you down forever. You will never control your own bodies. You will never be the president of the global empire. Never gonna happen, sweetie. Your body, our choice.
So after posting this and it going viral, Nick Fuentes was doxxed and was shamed all across the internet for these comments. He then doubled down in this post. He posted on November 5th. It says, "Your body, my choice, forever." But we're not only seeing this rhetoric from people like Nick Fuentes. It's not just him who is saying these things. This next post is brought to you by Andrew Tate. He's responding to a post that says, "I'm just a girl standing in front of the world asking for a president who isn't a rapist." And he responded, "Request denied." And this last post I'm going to show you here, I personally think about quite a lot. It's from Matt Walsh, and it says, "Now that the election is over, I think we can finally say that, yeah, actually, Project 2025 is the agenda. LOL." I want to address Nick. Thank you for calling it a brick ceiling. For once, you've got something right. It's never felt like glass, and the ceiling that's held women back for centuries has been heavy, solid, and unyielding. But bricks can be broken. Persistence can wear them down, and the strength found in womanhood, the resilience, the defiance, is something that you could never fathom. And here's the thing. You and your ignorance are the very fuel that makes us push harder and break through faster. We are not stopping until every last brick crumbles. And I promise you, I am not alone. You and your rhetoric have managed to anger millions of people around the world, and together we will crumble this wall. And Nick, a huge thank you for single handedly curing my eating disorder. I mean, with words like yours, I'm practically eating 3 meals a day just to be ready in case I ever have the privilege of encountering your wisdom face to face. The toxic manosphere has inspired me. If it weren't for mediocre white men and their trash ass opinions, or men with so called progressive takes that barely press the envelope, getting these massive platforms, I really wouldn't be here. These takes from white supremacists are appalling, and they are radical, and they are not normal. These are reactions to women and feminine presenting people gaining the power that we have today in today's world. I have a question for all of the minority Trump voters, the gays for Trump, the Latinos for Trump, the women for Trump. Is this the party that represents you? When you hear Nick Fuentes double down on a take like your body, my choice as a woman Trump voter, do you not cringe on the inside? Do you not question the platform? Moving along, I want to talk about the shift that we've seen in our culture. According to reports, the Trump campaign was instructed to consult 18-year-old Barron on his dad's appearances with podcasters popular with young men, like Logan Paul, Theo Vaughn, and Joe Rogan. This is what I think a lot of people are referring to as the conservative shift. We've seen a huge uptick in alt-right pipelines and red-pilled content online, and in many different internet spaces like blue collar content, workout content, podcasting, Jubilee content, gaming spaces. And this isn't something that just affects spaces that have primarily men. We also see it in an uprise in tradwife content, and in 2022, when my For You page was just full of slow living content. And this all plays a key role in the far right's radicalization pipeline. This process often unfolds gradually as people are exposed to increasingly extreme content. Here are some themes and tactics to look out for. You will often see anti-establishment rhetoric. These people will frame themselves as champions of the people or fighting against like a corrupt or oppressive elite or government. You will see them use conspiracy theories throughout their content to fuel fear and resentment, also making listeners more susceptible to radicalization. They will use dog whistles and code words to avoid explicit hate speech violations, but also still signal their true beliefs to their audience. And you'll see historical revisionism come from these people. They'll offer an alternative version of history that attempts to legitimize their calls for ethno-nationalism and exclusionary policies. Through exposure to these voices, people begin to explore more radical content. We see a shift towards fringe content as listeners delve deeper into far-right podcasts, networks. And oftentimes they adopt more extreme beliefs, anything from white nationalism to anti-Semitism. The role of podcasts and alt-right content in the radicalization pipeline underscores the importance of media literacy and algorithmic transparency, in my opinion. Or that's what I wrote down anyway. We have allowed the trad wife and I'm just a girl trope to rise, and we have allowed it to undermine women's abilities and our role in modern society. And as a side note, I was just thinking about this. It's like we as a generation, Gen Z, almost had it. Like we saw the failings of capitalism and we loved the idea of minimized labor and hard work. But then we ended up moving more conservative instead. Gen Z isn't the most progressive generation, and we're almost split between being either very conservative or very progressive. But we can't just talk about the podcasts and act like they started all of this. I want to talk about some of the alt right breeding grounds and, like, really how we saw this happen. With platforms like Parler and Truth Social and now X, we'll see as regular users migrate away from these platforms to alternatives like Blue Sky, these spaces risk becoming alt-right hubs for organizing, free from scrutiny, free from fact-checking, and free from accountability. I want to move away from this topic just for a second, and I want to talk about the most Google searches after the election and the general misinformation we saw. I know that it's been done to death, but I will make it as quick as I want to. One of the top searches was, can I change my vote? No. One of the next top searches after the election was, is the Affordable Care Act and Obamacare the same thing? Oh my gosh, yes. Another top search was, is Project 2025 real? It always has been. And I plan to do a podcast here in the future about fear baiting and rage baiting in politics and how that kind of creates this boy who cried wolf pattern where the general public, when there is big issues that happen, doesn't believe the political strategists because we are using the fear baiting so often. We, the American people, are being taken advantage of by the two-party system. We are educated only enough to believe what they've taught us. The average American reader reads at a 7th to 8th grade level, and about 21% of adults in the United States are illiterate or functionally illiterate, which is about 43 million Americans. They count on us being uneducated, underpaid, overworked, and divided. Extremist conservatism isn't popular, but their platform thrives on fear and misinformation. And a lot of the misinformation that we saw during the election was around the economy. Studies have shown that it takes usually between 2 to 5 years for policy changes to actually be seen in the state of the economy, depending on the nature of the policy. Sure, you might see initial hype and spikes in the stock market, but stocks are so disconnected from how the average person perceives the economy. We have to start understanding that the economy under a president is residual. Trump rode the trends started by Obama, Biden rode the trends started by Trump, and so on. Republicans will start crediting Trump for the economy Biden's built and launched following a recession, the same way they blamed Biden for the economy he adopted from Trump. Under a second Trump turn, the average American will see higher taxes and larger bills. 83% of his tax cuts in Trump's proposed tax plan go to people making over $500,000 annually. That is not the everyday American. That is not me and you. Another big search after the election and big topic of conversation is, what is a tariff and who pays it? Tariffs, if you didn't know already, are a tax on products that go from one country to another. Your bills will be higher because of Trump's tariffs. Donald Trump's proposed tariffs, particularly his plan to impose a 25% tariff on imports from Mexico and Canada starting in January of 2025, are expected to significantly impact the United States economy and its international relationships. Mexico and Canada are the United States' first and third largest import partners. Trump's tariffs could drive up inflation by nearly 1%, with costs rising across industries, especially in sectors like cars, medical equipment, and agriculture. This would lead to higher prices for consumers, people like you and me who buy the products, and disrupt production networks. Recently, I'm sure, if you're not paying attention, during a meeting with Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, despite the light-hearted tone, Trudeau was concerned that Trump's tariff threats were serious and could harm both Canadian and American businesses. This is where Trump suggested that Canada could avoid his proposed tariffs by becoming the 51st state. Trump then posted an AI picture of himself and the American flag on a place we can only assume to be Canada. And he has doubled down on this rhetoric a lot, actually. Wrapping this all up, in short, on tariffs. Trump's tariffs could significantly escalate costs for everyday people buying things in the United States. It could also strain relations with trade partners, and we are going to see these effects play out throughout 2025 and beyond. And we could also see it potentially reshape the United States trade dynamics and inflation rates. It's definitely going to affect inflation rates and trade dynamics. There is no maybe. It is definitely going to happen. Well, we can't talk about a second Trump presidency without talking about immigration. Trump's immigration policies have raised significant concerns, particularly with his focus on mass deportations and the continued construction of concentration camps. Concentration camps in the United States. His vision for mass deportation is not only affecting undocumented immigrants, but also United States citizens and longtime residents. His proposed raids, which targets workplaces and schools, could displace millions of people, including families with U.S.-born children. Many immigrant workers play vital roles in essential industries, including agriculture and food processing. Their removal could lead to severe labor shortages and higher costs for consumers, people like you and me who buy the product. Countries like Mexico, the Bahamas, and Panama have strongly rejected Donald Trump's proposal to deport individuals to their countries. Mexico is attempting to negotiate with the United States to avoid being a primary destination for deportees, and the Bahamas outright rejected the idea of accepting deportees. And Panama has yet to officially respond, but has made it clear that they have no obligation to take in deportees. Also, did everybody just forget about 2020? In 2020, under Donald Trump's leadership, the United States faced an unprecedented combination of crises. The pandemic exposed mass distrust in government institutions, and it was fueled by Trump downplaying the virus and promoting racism and misinformation. The distrust in the public health was also amplified by figures like Joe Rogan, whose platform moved right during this period. His influence helped foster a culture of misinformation, contributing to vaccine hesitancy and further dividing our country. And we can't not talk about the Black Lives Matter movement that was sparked by the death of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and many more. The protests that followed were met with violent police responses, and it really showed how deeply ingrained racial violence is here in our United States institutions. and the Trump administration used force to disperse and harm peaceful protesters. MAGA women. Dear MAGA women, we have to talk about the false sense of safety that you are buying into. This isn't just about abortion bans, but about the broader agenda that's being pushed. Laws, policies, and people who would rather control us than protect us. Texas has seen a significant spike in both maternal and infant mortality rates since their abortion ban took effect. The infant mortality rate increased by 8% in 2022 compared to a mere 2% in the rest of the country. Maternal death rates have similarly surged, with women being denied life-saving care due to these abortion restrictions. But we can move away from abortion. We're also talking about a broader assault on women's rights, on voting rights, reproductive rights, and basic human dignity. When you vote for men like Trump or date these alt-right men, you're enabling the same individuals who push these harmful policies. The same men supporting these laws, like Trump or Matt Gaetz, have been publicly linked to violent behavior and mistreatment of women. Please evaluate the hatred that these men have for all women. You are not safe until we fight for our rights, the rights to our body, the rights to our voices, and the rights to our collective future. Turning a blind eye to this violence does not mean you are safe from it. Ignoring the harm these men cause does not protect you. You may think you're getting a seat at the table, but they don't want you at the table. The devastation we'll see under a second Trump presidency is almost unimaginable at this point, but it's quickly becoming very clear. While in 2016, Trump was seen as an outsider with a blend of support from his own base and the Republican National Convention infrastructure, his current leadership shows a complete takeover. Trump now embodies the establishment within the party, his influence and brand dominating its direction. He now drives the party's agenda, with loyalists shaping his decisions and aligning with his vision. He is no longer just a figurehead, but is the central figure. The damage of a first Trump presidency had really long-term implications, but the consequences of his return to power is even more dire, as his impact on the Supreme Court and policies on race, gender, and public health will resonate for generations. So what now? What now, Sydney? You just gave us all of these horrible things. What now? I think a lot of people are here. I've personally been here for a while. A lot of the organizers that I work with and know needed to take that space to ask, what now after the election? Kamala wasn't going to save us. Even if Kamala had won the presidency, her ability to save the country would have been limited by the systemic and structural issues that the United States is rapidly descending into. We have entrenched polarization, unchecked corporate power, economic inequalities, and increasingly fragile democratic framework. A Harris presidency wouldn't have addressed the root causes of our societal decline here in the United States. Deepening cracks in our democracy suggests that no single leader can reverse our trajectory without broader systemic change. I've been seeing so much finger pointing after the election. And so I want to talk about the failings of the Democratic Party. Gen Z often gravitates towards anti-establishment views, challenging traditional systems. The Democratic Party is a long-standing institution, and is closely tied with established norms, regulations, and a rule following approach. Meanwhile, the Trump administration has a blatant disregard for laws and norms and is sometimes mistaken for being anti government. However, his behavior isn't about dismantling government systems, rather bending them for personal or partisan gain. This really creates a disconnect for younger voters who might view any rule breaking as inherently revolutionary without really recognizing the deeper intentions or impacts behind the actions. I've seen so much finger pointing at leftists after the election for the Harris Walz loss, and I'd like to reiterate what's been said a million times. Kamala lost by such a wide margin that third party votes were inconsequential regardless. But moving on, failings of the Democratic National Convention platforms were large, and I'm going to detail them. There's been a lot of this discourse over the internet about the failings of the Democratic Party and it not being on leftists or individual voters for the loss. But there was a huge loss, and I think it's important to address all of them. There was a failure to address the genocide happening in Palestine, and refusing to call for divestment really alienated a lot of progressive voters who expect strong stances. The Democratic Party adopted more conservative positions to appeal to moderates. They moved more right during this election, and it really sidelined the progressive and young voters and left-leaning voters. The Democratic Party had ineffective messaging. They really struggled to craft a clear and inspiring narrative, and they really failed to counter the Republicans' emotionally driven, direct messaging. The Democratic Party neglected grassroots concerns. They focused on centrist policies that ignored key issues like economic inequality and climate justice, which resonate not only with young voters, but with working class voters. They had a weak social media strategy and, in general, just a weak media strategy. They failed to counter right wing media narratives or elevate progressive voices. And they did not rally the troops. They are reliant on establishment figures. Why were the Cheneys involved? That is never a way to appeal to a younger audience. That is absolute madness. They focused on moderates and establishment leaders, and that sidelined all of our voices, the regular non-Cheney voices of the voting population. They failed to build trust on key issues like healthcare, economic justice, climate change, and it created skepticism. And they had an overemphasis on rules. The Democrats focused on following political norms and regulations, even as the American public showed a preference for candidates like Trump, who defy these traditional rules. Well, I hope you took notes on all that. That'll be a test later. I'm just kidding. We have to change. We have to change the way that we think about voting. What is down ballot voting? I feel like I scream this as an organizer. Down ballot voting means voting for all of the candidates the rest of the way down the ballot that aren't the top ticket people like the president or the governor. These are people who are in charge of taking care of our communities and meeting the needs of people who live there. Down ballot candidates make important decisions that impact your well-being, and they determine whether you have access to reliable services. These are things like public transportation, healthcare, and education. Despite how central these decisions are to all of us, down ballot candidates receive the least amount of votes. In a typical election year, only around 50% of eligible voters bother to vote down ballot or even fill out the whole ballot. We have to do better. It does not end after you filled in the two bubbles. Do the whole thing, please. Oh my gosh. Also, talking in what now? We can't talk about what now without talking about the United Healthcare shooter and what the public's response means for our future. I'm not going to get too much into this. I would really like to just focus on the public's response. The public's reaction to the shooting of the United Healthcare CEO, Brian Thompson, really reflects deep frustration with the United Healthcare system, particularly with for-profit insurance companies. Many social media users expressed anger and made sarcastic comments tying the event to grievances over denied claims, high costs, and inaccessible care. Their shooting also sparked this kind of like rare bipartisan rage, with even like people like Ben Shapiro facing backlash from their audience for defending corporate leaders. This really highlights frustration across the political spectrum for profit healthcare companies because as Americans, we are increasingly resenting corporate greed in our essential services. Around 14 million adults in the United States owe over $1,000 in medical debt, with 3 million owning more than 10,000. Medical debt is a leading cause of bankruptcy in the United States, responsible for approximately 66.5% of all personal bankruptcies. This affects over 500,000 families each year. In the United States, the odds of becoming a billionaire are pretty minuscule. Fewer than 1 in 400,000 people will become a billionaire. Meanwhile, your risk of becoming homeless or experiencing houselessness is much higher. With over 500,000 people experiencing houselessness. What does this loop around to? Class solidarity. Class solidarity is about working together to fight inequality and demand justice. Under a second Trump presidency, we must keep the pressure on. Our collective strength can ensure that the fight for economic and social equality doesn't lose momentum. We can't lose momentum, but we might for a second. I need to hit the vape. Okay, I want to talk about all of the we just have to organize, we're going to just have to organize that I saw all across the internet after the election. I want to first explain a concept of ego-based activism versus empathy-based activism. As I led in my intro, I do nonprofit work and I also do just general community organizing. So I'm very familiar with what organizing actually is. There are two types of activists and advocates that you will run into on your journey in organizing. One is the ego-based activist. This person is very easy to spot. When talking about community, they will say they are the voice of the community. They do the work of an activist to gain momentum socially, societally, maybe for monetary reasons, but they do not do it with just the goal of helping people. They are usually the guy at the top. The other type of activist and advocate that you will come across is the empathy-based activist, When you talk to this person about community, they will tell you all of the amazing things in their community. They will never refer to themselves as, the voice of their community. They will simply use the term uplifting other voices. They are a true ally. They do not step on others to get ahead, and oftentimes they are very underpaid, very overworked, but very passionate about the work that they do. There is some slight intersection between the two. You cannot be an activist or want to be an activist without a little bit of empathy, and you cannot be an activist without a little bit of ego, because you are very much in the public. You very much are speaking to people. You very much maybe want to be seen and heard. Why am I telling you this? Because when I was scrolling on Instagram and I saw 100 stories that said we just need to organize, but then had 0 steps on what that meant or how you should go about that, I immediately thought how misleading that was. And I thought about the ego versus empathy. True activists will lead you to resources. They will say, here are great places to volunteer, get involved. This is where you should be directing donations. Hey, come out and come to this rally. Hey, this event is happening. Hey, city council is doing this. These people won't just tell you, go do it. They will give you action items. We need to collectively unfollow all of the people who continue to post, you just need to organize, we just need to organize, follow me to learn how to organize. We need to deplatform these types of ego-based activists because they will never teach you how to organize. Ultimately, they would never want you to be a better organizer than them, and they will let their community fail if it means that they cannot remain in a position of power. Also, posting on social media isn't enough. You need to plug into your local organizations. You need to become a volunteer. You need to donate to your local organizations. You need to watch your city council meetings either virtually or in person. So, this kind of leads me into what is mutual aid. I'm going to do a whole episode on this. I'm super excited. It will not just only be me on the pod. I have wonderful guests lined up, other activists, union members, leaders, etc. I'm really excited to bring you into my community and uplift people who, don't have millions of followers but are doing the everyday work. But for now, here is just a short little tidbit. Mutual aid is when people in a community come together to support each other's needs directly without relying on charities or government help. It's about sharing resources, skills, and support to help everyone thrive, especially those who need it the most. I want to end today's episode by talking about community. And unity is in all caps of that community if you were to spell it. As we wrap up today's episode, let's reflect on the power of community, the strength we gain when we come together. Unity isn't about agreement, but it is about having the hard conversations, confronting the uncomfortable truths, staying committed to the work that really just needs to be done. It's about holding space for different voices, recognizing that progress requires both collaboration and persistence. It's built when we face challenges head on with empathy and a shared sense of purpose. This is how we continue to push for change, creating a future that is inclusive, creating a future that is equitable, creating a future that is just. So let's keep the momentum, let's keep talking, and keep working for the communities we live in and believe in. Thank you so much for listening to my first episode of Curly Convos. I'm really excited. I'm going to try to not nitpick myself too much during this process. But I do want you to bully me in the comments when I say too many times. Join me every other Friday for bold takes, fresh perspectives, and unfiltered discussions that push boundaries and inspire actions. And make sure to catch up with me on social media at Curly Convos Podcast. I will see you soon. Bye.